You are listening to Hillary Topper on Air, the small business podcast to help you grow both personally and professionally. And now, here's your host, Hillary Topper.
Hiring the right people is one of the most crucial aspects of building a thriving organization. Talent is a company's most valuable asset, and the ability to identify, attract, and retain top performers is more critical than ever. Many companies struggle with this essential task, resulting in costly mishires and missed opportunities. I'm Hillary Topper, and welcome to Hillary Topper on Air. Today, we're joined by Scott Mesh, a seasoned expert in the field of hiring and talent management. With over 20 years of experience, Scott is a top grading professional at Topgrading Inc. Scott, welcome to the show. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got involved with top grading?
Sure. Well, I'm a psychologist and worked with young children for a long time. And then I started a company, Los Niños Services. Ran that for 25 years and grew that from a small company to, 300 staff. And now I'm working with Top Grading, doing the thing that I love most, which is hiring great people.
So, for those unfamiliar, can you explain what top grading is and how it differs from other methodologies?
Yes. Well, top grading is the only validated and researched hiring method which shows how you can hire up to 80, 90% good hires, as opposed to what most of us experience, which is maybe we get it right a quarter or maybe even up to half of the time. It's one of the most difficult things that we do. And top grading started by this organizational psychologist, Brad Smart, who graduated, started working and hiring, and people didn't really know what they were doing. And he was asking questions. How do we know it's working? They're like, well, I don't know. We just hire. And then he developed this methodology, which worked well and was picked up by some of the top companies in the world, like Nike, GE, and companies like that. So we're sought out by folks who know that hiring the right person really makes a difference.
Wow, that's great. I mean, it really does. And it really can destroy a company when you hire the wrong person, So talk a
Absolutely.
little talk a little bit about the top grading scorecard. What is that and how does it work?
Well, there's a couple of elements in hiring that you need to get right. So the first thing is knowing what you want. Now, when you're hiring for a role, most people have job descriptions, but they're a little bit generic, like ongoing, I'll have this responsibility for, as opposed to like a scorecard, which is a lot more specific. So I'm going to increase sales by 20% in the first year. Something you know if you did it or you didn't. And then when you evaluate candidates, you're looking at their past performance much, much more than what they say they'll do in the future. So did they ever increase sales 20%? So the scorecard is really the basis, most important thing. That's where most of us miss it. We don't want to take the time, or we're not really sure what it is or how to do it. And we're like, I'll go with my gut. So it feels good to go with your gut. The problem is that we only get it right maybe a quarter, maybe half of the time at most with our gut. So maybe it's time to use your gut and something more researched, validated, and that is proven to give the results that we're looking for.
Why do you believe that hiring usually doesn't work out as well for many companies? I know for me, I used to hire based on whether or not it would, we can go out for drinks together. But that's really the wrong way to look at it, right? So
Mhm.
can you kind of walk us through that?
So I would say that's chemistry. And chemistry is great. Chemistry is important. The only thing is, when you hire somebody, you're not hiring them to go out for drinks. You're hiring them to get a job done. Now, the going out to drinks is a piece of it because you want to feel okay with the person. You want some chemistry. You don't want to feel like it's just work, 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 and you don't like them or they don't like you. So it's chemistry plus plus. So a big component of top grading is the competency component. Do they have the skill to get the job done? Then there's also the cultural component. So that's where, the drinks is definitely a big step towards that. But then more than that, to the values that you have in your company. Are you hiring somebody who, as Jeff Hoffman likes to say, is one of us? People that have similar values and ideas. And then, who the person is overall. And that's the top grading final interview, which encompasses everything.
So how do you cut through the truth, right? There are people who tell you things just because they think you want to hear them.
Sure.
What do you do to cut through those, and what are some of the effective techniques here?
Well, the most important technique is the reference check. So I've hired hundreds of people in my time, and I've been top grading for about 20 years. I was trained by Brad Smart and others. So what love about the process is you start out by saying very early, and by the way, we want to contact your supervisors, your past supervisors, so we can learn about your experiences with them. What happens then is that a lot of people just drop out. Maybe they didn't have a good experience, maybe they currently don't, or then they give you maybe excuses or, well, in our company, they don't allow that or so forth. Well, the thing is, when you have somebody who's a strong performer, you may have this at your company that their policy is not to give reference checks because they don't want to be sued. However, the A players, what are they going to say? They're just going to say positive things. So they arrange for those reference checks and they get that done. So if somebody is unwilling or unable to do that, that's a red flag. So that is the most important thing in terms of getting the truth. And then the reference person, then the candidate knows that the reference is going to talk to you, and not just one reference, but basically all the supervisors you've had in the last, let's say, 10 years. So if you had several people, it's not like, picking which ones are the best. And that way, the candidate knows that they really have to give a truthful version, because if not, they're going to get a different message on the reference check, and that's not going to be good.
Hmm. Well, what happens to somebody, maybe it's a young person who had their first job, it was a really bad experience for them, and they left, maybe they got fired, maybe they just left on their own accord, but that's the only job that they've ever had, and it wasn't a good experience, and
Hmm.
they're applying for this new job, and they really feel like they should be hired, but they know they're not going to get a good reference check. What happens in that case? I mean, are there other um are there other levels that you look at?
So it's a good question. Absolutely. I've hired many people who are out of school who don't have extensive work histories. Maybe they worked at one place or two, and even some haven't had good experience. So it's not so much that someone has to have like 100% everything lines up, perfectly. Um, However, it's the nature of the story that makes a difference and how someone shares it with you. I can think back to someone I hired, and again, just graduated from college, and this person had worked at Kmart, and the job that I was hiring her for was to be a case manager. So it wasn't a lot to bank on, and there wasn't a lot of history to go with. However, in this case, the person also did very well in school. So I knew they had something going on up here. They're a hard worker or very smart or both. And I remember the Kmart story because I asked how it was. She was like, she liked it. And I'm like, isn't that kind of a boring job? She was like, well, yeah, but she was very proud because they had sales targets, and she always was the top hot dog seller out of everyone in the store. So she had excelled. Now, what do you know about selling hot dogs? Well, you got to be friendly, you got to be good at customer service. And the job that I was hiring for was customer service. So that was very, very relevant. What turned out is the woman worked for us for a couple of years, and she did a fantastic job, and she was excellent at customer service.
Wow.
So there are also, you asked about negative experiences. I can think back to different interviews where someone had difficulties with a boss. And uh, there was one person who explained, the relationship wasn't really that good. And I asked just a little bit more, and I said, it's up to you. You don't really have to share anything you're uncomfortable with, but I just wonder if you could tell me a little bit more. And by the little bit that she shared very appropriately, she wasn't, starting out by, this guy was terrible and what have you. But the little she shared made it abundantly clear that this was not a good person. So the fact that she was, offering it, in just a very small way, sensitively, thoughtfully, and the fact that she was able to stick it out for a time period, you don't want somebody to stick it out for too long, but she handled it very, very well, and the person was hired, and she did fine.
Mm, that's
So you
great.
don't have to have 100% in every area. You don't have to have A++ in every situation. If you're able to explain it in a way that makes sense, then yes, it's worth taking chances with folks if the story makes sense to you.
So between being an entrepreneur and also having a psychology background, um, do you feel like you really know people when you interview them? You ask the right question. I mean, obviously you ask the right questions, but you get that real sense. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So that's a good point. The answer is yes. I definitely feel like I have a good sense of this person. So the top grading approach is longer than other approaches. And usually the biggest criticism is how long it takes to go through the process. I don't have time for that. But then you don't have time to take another hour or two, but it's okay to hire the wrong person.
Mm.
Let me think about that. Maybe you should take that extra hour or two, get to know the person well enough so that you don't have a revolving door. So that's what we found. And in terms of, yes, like you put it, when you ask the right questions and you get important information, my God, in a couple of minutes you can learn really important things. But if you have an hour or two, uh, and if you go through the competency questions, you go through the history, absolutely have a very good feeling. So we are the company that I ran for 25 years, Los Niños Services, is one of the case studies in the third edition of the Top Grading book. How did we get there? Um, we use Top Grading, getting the right people, and that
Wow.
has made all the difference.
That absolutely can make or break any business, especially for a small business or an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
So, talk a little bit about some of the costs associated with mishires and how detrimental that could be for a company.
Well, the cost is the thing that first off, I think people underappreciate. Because if they really thought through the full costs of searching, recruiting, training, replacing, disruption in the workplace, then you can start to understand how the studies show that on the lower level positions, it might cost you an annual salary of that person to replace them.
Wow.
And then for higher level positions, it could be several times their annual salary or
Mm.
or even greater in a larger organization. So getting it right is so crucial. I mean, who wants to have somebody that's not pulling their weight, somebody that's dragging everybody down? I mean, nobody wants that. The the challenge is that most people just are not aware that there is a methodology out there that's been researched and validated, and you just have to follow it and learn it. You can either consult with people that do it for you, or you can learn the process yourself, and then you can do it like we did.
Mm. Interesting. What do you think some of the common hiring mistakes are, and how can companies, small businesses, large businesses, entrepreneurs avoid them?
The most common issue is that people shoot from the hip. They're rushing. you know, everybody can admit, I can admit too, sometimes you get to the interview, you didn't even like go over the resume and so forth. You're not prepared properly. Okay, so everybody has those days. However, the failure to recognize how good or not good you're doing is the first thing. A lot of people are like, well, I know people, I get a feeling, you know, like you gave the example, if I feel like going out to drinks with the person, they're hired. Well, if they're going to go out to drinks and that is going to be the job that you want them to do, that is a fantastic way to do it. But if you want them to do some other tasks, maybe you should reconsider that methodology. And basically the question is, how's that working for you?
Not well.
What's your retention rate?
Right.
26% is like the average of good hires.
Wow.
So uh if you're not getting the results you want, then you gotta do something different.
So let's talk about some examples of some of the companies that you've worked with with top grading and that you've seen significant improvements.
hmm So I can think of a company that is in social services. They had been without a top position in their company of 100 for a year. So they had to kind of re-engineer what they were doing. The first thing they had to do was admit, hey, something's not working here. They had audits going, they had, all kinds of turnover in their business. So they started out with scorecard, getting clear on what exactly they needed, then developing the right competency interview for this position, and then finally establishing the top grading, which is the more in-depth history part of the interview as well. So they went through this process and they were able to find just the right person, and things are moving forward.
Great. That's awesome. And in your opinion, how will the field of hiring and talent management evolve during the next few years?
Well, I'm hoping that people will recognize that unless you have a rigorous hiring methodology, you're not going to get the people you need. Now, the top grading methodology was really developed initially for more senior people, executives and so forth.
Interesting.
However, you can use the elements for more mid-level and even entry-level folks. So, for example, in Los Niños, I worked before, we didn't do 3-hour competency interviews, uh, 3-hour top grading interviews, as well as don't forget the screening and all the rest. That was too much time. But we took the basic elements and we pared it down to what we needed. But by establishing the competency, if you know what you're looking for, you have a relatively simple job. You should have maybe 3 to 5 main competencies, main areas of responsibility the person has. Maybe they might have other miscellaneous, but really there's not too many main areas. You are clear about exactly what you need. You should be able to ask at least a few questions each that are prepared ahead of time, so that you can get a clear understanding of that person's skill in each of those areas. Then, when you do their history, which means you go through jobs since high school, in the case of a full top grading interview, if you have somebody who's entry level, it's not going to take that long because they don't have that much work experience. What were highs? What were lows? Who assisted you along the way? What was your relationship like with that supervisor or mentor? Just a couple of basic questions that you repeat, and then lo and behold, people have patterns. And the patterns can change. However, generally there's patterns, at least for some time. So for example, high school, maybe they did really well, they worked really hard. College, they did well, they worked really hard. The next job, same thing. So, you have a hard worker who likes to excel and they're proven. You can have histories that vary. Sometimes somebody didn't get it together in high school, but then later on, they kind of buckled down and they focused, did okay in college, and then really excelled in the future. So it's getting that pattern, being really clear what you're looking for, the scorecard, which is the target, because how can you hit a target you do not have?
Hmm.
So you
So,
have to have the target, then you have to get the information which will match up with the target to know, do you have a bullseye or not? Usually, I've done hundreds of interviews. The A players that stand out, I usually know very early in the interview process, really, really early. Then the people that are definite no's, I know that early. The struggle that we tend to have is the ones that are in the middle. And if your goal is to have people that excel at every level, then you're looking for the A players.
mhm.
And then you have to be strong and methodical and say, listen, I know this person's not there. When you have to start going down the list, and are they are they this well? Are they good enough? I don't know. I'm not sure. Should we take a chance? Then, that's you're taking chances, taking chances. And
This
if you
is
have and if you
yeah.
have enough candidates, and if you've done a good job selling there, then you can take your pick.
This has been so interesting. And we could probably talk about this for hours, but unfortunately, time is up. So let me ask you, can you tell our listeners how to get in touch with you and to learn more about top grading? Because this is really a game changer, I think, in the employment industry.
Thanks so much, Hillary. Yes, it is a game changer, and that's why I'm really happy to be there. So topgrading.com. They can find me through there, Scott Mesh. You just ask for me, but you just contact me through the website. Very simple. Or scott.mesh@topgrading.com.
Terrific. And I'll make sure to put that in the notes when I post this on the blog. Thank you so much, Scott, for being on the show. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, the Russo Law Group, Long Island Signature Estate Planning, Elder Law, and Special Needs Law Firm. For more information, visit vjrussolaw.com, and Buddha Bath, a natural bath and body care company. For more information, visit buddhabath.net. And last but not least, I want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in each week. If you want more information on this show or any other show, please visit our website at hillarytopper.com, or you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Amazon Alexa, Apple Podcasts, you name it. We're out there. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.